सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की जय, रामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद से अद्वैत गदाधर शिवास आदि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गौ गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिवर्धन की जय, वृंदावन धाम की जय, नवद्वीप धाम की जय, स्वामी तो भक्तवृंद की जय, गंगा माई की जय, जमुना माई की जय, तुलसी देवी की जय, भक्ति देवी की जय, स्वामी तो भक्तवृंद की जय। All glories to the Assembly Lord. All glories to the Assembly. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, and you're welcome very much, Mother Malati. Hare Krishna. Thank you for being here.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And Hare Krishna, Srivatvanachari. Hare Krishna. Thank you. So, Mother, as usual, well, good to see you. How are you doing, Mother?
Oh, you're speaking to me?
Yes.
Hare Krishna, sorry.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I'm very happy because this celebration for Gaur Purnima has been going on for me, 5 different celebrations in different places and spaces.
Wow.
So I'm wishing all of you that had a wonderful Gaur Purnima.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we also did. Maybe not as much as yours, but quite similar. We had different days.
Yeah.
And different celebrations.
This is the first time for me that I had, sometimes maybe there's a couple, but this was like 4 of them were in person and 1 was online in Siberia.
Wow.
And I just have to say something. That was really so amazing because I don't know what you think when you think of Siberia, but for us, it's kind of like a place of desolation,
yes.
Hell, terrible place.
Yeah.
And I mean, in fact, it used to be where the Russians would send unfortunate prisoners to suffer,
Yeah.
And here is this beautiful temple, just extraordinary, full of beautiful devotees in saris and dhotis, tilak, and panchatattva. And they're like 1.5 meters tall, brass, made by the same Stampak who did the deities, the large deities in Mayapur. So their presence is powerful. But on top of that, there's this flourishing tulsi. It's just beautiful. And then you have to remind yourself, this is Siberia. But what's even more powerful is to realize the power of Lord Chaitanya's movement and of Prabhupada's exquisite presence and determination to cover the whole world.
Oh, thank you so much, Mother. Yes. Siberia is extremely cold.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Okay. Hare Krishna. So if you wouldn't mind, I think there was a bit of an error because I was trying to get in touch with the devotee who did the scheduling, because they had you on for texts 42 and 43.
Right.
But both texts have quite a lengthy purpose. So I don't know how you want to handle them,
Yeah, I was a little surprised, but I just figured there's, there's always some reason. So
Yeah, I think there was a bit of an error there, but maybe Krishna will
I
help
think
you.
40, what's it, 42 and 43, right?
Yes, Mother.
Yeah. So 42 has, let me see, I don't have a book. Yeah, 42 has the longer purport.
Yeah, 43 also has a lot.
We'll just go with it. We'll see where Krishna takes us on this one.
Okay.
I have to end pretty much on time because I have another engagement, but I have to drive to it for
Okay.
a few hours.
So handle it the way that is convenient to you, Mother. So I'll put the verse on the screen. Put the 42, and you may take it from here, Mother. Hare
Yeah,
Krishna.
I'll read it from my screen because I can
Okay.
adjust the size. My eyes are like
Okay.
not
Please do that.
extremely well.
Do
So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from SRIMAD Bhagavatam, first canto, 13th chapter. Dhritarashtra retires. And text 42. Yata gavonasi protas satyam varaschadam abhi vaktyantyam namabhirbadha vahanti balim ishtitu. Translate, synonym, I'll just read the whole thing. Synonyms, yata, as much as, gava, cow, nasi, by the nose, prataha, strung, tantyam, by the thread, badha, bound by, cha, also, damabi, by the ropes, vaktantyam, in the network of Vedic hymns, namapi, by nomenclature, badha, conditioned, bahanti, carry on, balim, orders, ishtitu, for being controlled by the Supreme Lord. Translation. As a cow bound through the nose by a long rope is conditioned, so also human beings are bound by different Vedic injunctions and are conditioned to obey the orders of the Supreme. Purport. Every living being, whether a man or an animal or a bird, if I'm actually reading too fast, just let me know. I'm kind of intentionally reading a little quickly, but if it's too fast, please just tell me and I'll slow down.
Okay, thank you.
So, thinks that he is free by himself, but actually no one is free from the severe laws of the Lord. The laws of the Lord are severe because they cannot be disobeyed in any circumstances. The man-made laws may be evaded by cunning outlaws, but in the codes of the supreme lawmaker, there is not the slightest possibility of neglecting the laws. A slight change in the course of God-made law can bring about a massive danger to be faced by the lawbreaker. Such laws of the Supreme are generally known as the codes of religion under different conditions, but the principle of religion everywhere is one and the same, namely, obey the laws of the Supreme God, the codes of religion. That is the condition of material existence. All living beings in the material world have taken up the risk of conditioned life by their own selection and are thus entrapped by the laws of material nature. The only way to get out of the entanglement is to agree to obey the Supreme. But instead of becoming free from the clutches of Maya, illusion, foolish human beings become bound up by different nomenclatures, being designated as Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Sudras, Hindus, Mohammedans, Indians, Europeans, Americans, Chinese, and of course Africans, and many others. And thus they carry out the orders of the Supreme Lord under the influence of respective scriptural or legislative injunctions. The statutory laws of the state are imperfect imitation replicas of religious codes. The secular state, or the godless state, allows citizens to break the laws of God, but restricts them from disobeying the laws of the state. The result is that the people in general suffer more by breaking the laws of God than by obeying the imperfect laws made by man. Every man is imperfect by constitution under the conditions of material existence, and there is not the least possibility that even the most materially advanced man can enact perfect legislation. In other words, it is not possible. On the other hand, there is no such imperfection in the laws of God. If leaders are educated in the laws of God, there is no necessity of makeshift legislation council of aimless men. There is necessity of change in the makeshift laws of man, but there is no change in God-made laws because they are made perfect by the all-perfect personality of Godhead. The codes of religion, scriptural injunctions, are made by liberated representatives of God in consideration of different conditions of living. And by carrying out the orders of the Lord, the conditioned soul, the conditioned living beings gradually become free from the clutches of material existence. The factual position of the living being is, however, that he is the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. In his liberated state, he renders service to the Lord in transcendental love and thus enjoys a life of full freedom, even sometimes on an equal level with the Lord, or sometimes more than the Lord. But in the conditioned material world, every living being wants to be the Lord of other living beings, and thus by the illusion of Maya, this mentality of lording it over becomes a cause of further extension of conditional life. So in the material world, the living being is still more conditioned until he surrenders unto the Lord by reviving his original state of eternal servitorship. That is the last instruction of Bhagavad Gita and all other recognized scriptures of the world. Text 43. Yatha kridopaskaranam samyoga vidyamaviha ichaya kriditu syatyam tataivyasya chaya nirnam. Synonyms. Yatha, as much as, krita upakaranam, playthings. Samyoga, union. Vigamo, disunion. Iha, in this world. Ichaya, by the will of. Kritu, just to play a part. Shatam, takes place. Tata, so also. Eva, certainly. Isha, the Supreme Lord. Ishaya, by the will of. Nirnam, of the human beings. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. As a player sets up and disperses his playthings according to his own sweet will, so the supreme will of the Lord brings men together and separates them. We must know for certain that the particular position in which we are now set is an arrangement of the supreme will in terms of our own acts in the past. The Supreme Lord is present as the localized Paramatma in the heart of every living being, as it is said in the Bhagavad Gita 13:23. And therefore, he knows everything of our activities in every stage of our lives. He rewards the reactions of our actions by placing us in some particular place. A rich man gets his son born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but the child who came in as the rich man's son deserves such a place, and therefore he is placed there by the will of the Lord. And at a particular moment, when the child has to be removed from that place, he is also carried by the will of the Supreme, even if the child or the father do not wish to be separated from the happy relation. The same thing happens in the case of a poor man also. Neither rich man nor poor man has any control over such settings or separations of living beings. The example of a player and his playthings should not be misunderstood. One may argue that since the Lord is bound to award the reactionary results of our own actions, the example of a player cannot be applied, but it is not so. We must always remember that the Lord is the supreme will, and he is not bound by any law. Generally, the law of karma is that one is awarded the result of his own actions. But in special cases, by the will of the Lord, such resultant actions are changed also. But this change can be effected by the will of the Lord only and no other. Therefore, the example of the player cited in this verse is quite appropriate, for the supreme will is absolutely to do whatever he likes, and because he is all perfect, there is no mistake in any of his actions or reactions. These changes of resultant actions are especially rendered by the Lord when a pure devotee is involved. It is assured in the Bhagavad Gita 9:30-31 that the Lord saves a pure devotee who has surrendered unto him without reservation from all sorts of reactionary sins, and there is no doubt about this. There are hundreds of examples of reactions changed by the Lord in the history of the world. If the Lord is able to change the reactions of one's past deeds, then certainly he is not himself bound by any action or reaction of his own deeds. He is perfect and transcendental to all laws. Okay. Om Gyantimirandasya Janana Sakalaya Chakchum Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vansha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vayevicha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, here, Hare Krishna again. Thank you all for being present and kindly inviting me. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, thank you for kindly inviting me to make a fool of myself. But I will try to say something on behalf of Srila Prabhupada, using his own words most of the time. So, just a little kind of recap of some of the amazing instructions that are contained within this particular chapter. I was looking up, as I want to do, what did Prabhupada say outside of the purports? Were there any particular classes he gave on the particular chapter and specifically the verses? So there were four lectures in Switzerland, I think in 74 by His Divine Grace, but not on these particular verses, but he touched on some of the themes and some of the instructions. And it's something I really always observe, how he integrates, here's the chapter, here's the verse. Prabhupada is always observant of the greater picture. And so it's always being integrated by him, because he has such a broad-minded capacity and deeply realized of the summum bonum, you can say, the full picture. And so in this, chapter, we're finding how Maitreya Muni, that Narada Muni, he was convinced by Maitreya Rishi that the summum bonum of life is to be situated in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, who is Govinda, or one who seeks to satisfy his devotees in all respects. And that is just a very sweet meditation. And as we go further and we reconsider today's purports, we see how this is such an important aspect of understanding the Bhagavatam and practicing Krishna consciousness within our daily lives. That this remembering of the samambonam of life is to be situated in the transcendental loving service of Lord Krishna, who is Govinda, who satisfies his devotees in all respects. So according to, Prabhupada was saying how according to the Indian moral codes, even an enemy received at home, an enemy at home should be so well received that he won't feel fearful in any situation. Generally, an enemy is afraid of his enemy. But Prabhupada was saying, according to the actual moral codes, the etiquette of Indian moral codes, Indian etiquette, sometimes he will quote Chandraka Pandit, an enemy is always afraid of his enemy, but this should not be so when he's received at home by his enemy. And of course, we may think, well, why would we receive an enemy at home? But sometimes they come. And without getting into any details, I was, considering the incredible situation that's playing out in the headlines for most of us, but some people are right there on the ground, where we've got two countries side by side who have suddenly assumed the roles, hopefully it's temporary, the roles of enemy. And yet within these two countries, we have the presence of Lord Krishna, which means the presence of his devotees. And how conflicting this must be for those devotees who are there. But there's always a plan for everyone in Krishna's, by Krishna in our lives. The personality of Godhead, he's omnipresent everywhere. And Prabhupada uses the example that the power of electricity is distributed everywhere within space. So in the same way, the omnipresence of the Lord is perceived and manifested by unalloyed devotees. So, and in this case, the pure devotee Vidura, he was always feeling the presence of the Lord everywhere. And he sees everything in the potency of the Lord and the Lord in everything, just as we're taught in Bhagavad Gita. So the holy places all over the earth, they're meant for purifying the polluted consciousness of the human beings in an atmosphere that is surcharged by the presence of the devotees of the Lord. And as such, if anyone visits such a holy place, then we should reach out to those pure devotees residing there, and we should hear from them, take lessons from them, and apply those instructions in practical life in preparation for going back home, back to Godhead. And the implicit instruction is that going to some holy places of pilgrimage is not just to take a bath in the Ganges or the Yamuna or any holy river, not just to visit the temples, but to find the representative of the Lord, like Vidura, who have no desire in life other than serving the personality of Godhead. And these pure devotees of Krishna, they're always thinking of Krishna. Premanjana churita bhakti vilochena santa sadaiva hridayasho vilokayanti. They can't forget Krishna even for a second. They're carrying Krishna with them. And so because Krishna is with such a devotee, wherever that devotee goes, that place becomes a place of pilgrimage. Just like so many of our Hare Krishna temples outside of India have become places of pilgrimage because of the presence of Prabhupada when he was present, and now because of the glorious activities of the devotees and servants of Srila Prabhupada that make such places specially surcharged, spiritually surcharged, that people naturally gravitate and they come to those places. Even yesterday, there was in the fourth celebration of Gaur Purnima. I mentioned actually there was 5, one was online, so this was the 5th one. But there were 3 people that attended first time, and 2 of them had some kind of interactions with spiritual life, in Mayavad type of thing, but they were attracted. And there were 2 ladies and this one young man. And, this attraction was there not because of our big, beautiful building, because it's a small little former church in a small little tiny town, but because they heard there was going to be this wonderful celebration. And when they came and I was observing them, observing the devotees and how much they were feeling, you could tell they were feeling so attraction to be in the presence of devotees. And I was thinking how miraculous this was, because none of us were like big, powerful devotees, big, powerful, sannyasis or preachers, humble devotees just trying to celebrate Lord Chaitanya's appearance, trying to please Prabhupada, trying to please Lord Chaitanya. But that is so attractive. And that will attract the hearts of anyone. And this one, there was going to be the kirtan. And our temple president, he invited, does anybody want to lead? So this boy who has never been there before, he took up the offer, and I was kind of sitting on the edge of my chair for a moment, and he brings out his cell phone, he puts on some kind of background thing that started out with Om, Om, and I thought, oh my God, what's going to happen here? I was a little worried. But Lord Chaitanya is so magnanimous that by his effort, he entered into the heart of that devotee, and because he is a devotee, maybe not like rubber stamped according to our standpoint, but he's a devotee. He wouldn't have been there otherwise. And he started this kirtan, a little awkward, but because of his sincerity, it suddenly became a really sweet kirtan by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya in the holy name. So the personality of Godhead is always with such devotees because of their unalloyed service. So unalloyed service means without any tinge or fruit of action or any, utopian speculation, just always engaged in the actual service of the Lord, which is specifically meaning the process of hearing and chanting. And the pure devotees hear first from the authorities, and then they chant and sing and write of the glories of the Lord. And just like Srila Prabhupada was adamant that I am only presenting what I have heard from my spiritual master. I'm not adding, I'm not subtracting. And he taught us the same. I was mentioning to someone yesterday that I was initiated on January 17th of 67. I had not met Prabhupada just a couple days before that. There was no, it was the second temple, San Francisco. So we didn't have any prior experience, and those with prior experience had very little. So we're initiated, 4 of us, and he goes, now you go out and preach. And I was astounded. So I raised my hand, how do we do that? And Prabhupada was very grave. You simply listen to what I am saying, listen to what I'm speaking, and then you repeat. You don't add, you don't subtract. You may say in your own words, but you don't add, you don't subtract, you don't change the message. So this is how the pure devotees are able to reach out to people of all backgrounds, of all situations, educated or not, because of their desire to give the message, the pure message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And by their unalloyed devotion, the Lord within the heart prompts them to speak in such a way that they can reach out to anyone. And I experienced that with Srila Prabhupada also. Because of the shortness of time, I won't go into so much details, but I watched personally on many occasions, he was in what could have almost been a hostile environment, just because of the mindset of the people in the audience. And yet he was able to turn everything around simply due to the purity of his heart and the unmotivated actions. Only motivation was to present the truth and not motivated by any self-aggrandizement, any particular attention to himself. So by their pure actions, the devotees, they render any place into a place of pilgrimage. And the holy places are worth the name only on their account. So actually in ISKCON, we have so many holy places right there in our little temples in Ghana and Accra and so many other places in Africa. you have holy places, holy saintly places. I felt that so much in my 2 visits when I visited Ghana, that I was not in the material world anymore, even though they were the temples there. I was like so shocked how simple, I was used to these big fancy deity kitchens. And I remember when I first went into the kitchen in Ghana, I was so shocked, it was like so bare. It was just this tiny little stove, and yet the devotees are just coming up with this incredible prasad based on very little ingredients, just their desire to please Krishna and the devotees, and they were empowered. So pure devotees, they're able to rectify the polluted atmosphere of any place. And what to speak of a holy place rendered unholy by questionable actions of interested people. In other words, people come to the holy places. Sometimes they try to adopt a professional life at the cost of the reputation of a holy place, or they come to drop their sinful, karmas, which they do, drop that karma. And then because everybody's sinful, then that place becomes overwhelmed with sin. And the only way it can be rectified is by the presence of a saintly person. And a couple times in this particular chapter, this term Krishna Devata. So Krishna Devata means those who are always in rapt attention of the Lord, something we hope that we can become, Krishna Devatas, always in rapt attention, either remaining at home or leaving home. The real qualification of a pure devotee is to become wrapped in the thought of Krishna favorably. So according to like the civic laws, the Nitai Shastra, so this was being mentioned when Vidura came. He had come following the disappearance of Krishna and family members, and he comes to see the Pandavas, and it was really an emotionally heartbreaking description if you think about it. So he's, Yudhishthira wanted all kinds of information, and he told him everything except for the disappearance of Krishna and others. And so that was explained because according to Nitai Shastra, one shouldn't speak an unpalatable truth to cause distress to others. And that's because distress is going to come on anyway in its own way by the laws of nature. So we don't want to be the cause of aggravation. At the same time, by speaking the truth, if you don't speak the truth, then people can just go on in their unholy behavior. So Srila Prabhupada was so expert in delivering the message. He never adulterated. He never twisted it to be something that it wasn't, for fear of causing somebody some personal inconvenience or, causing them, I don't want to upset them. Actually, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, these Nitai Shastras, by the way, they're not Shastra in the terms of our Vaishnav heritage. So Srila Bhakti Siddhanta said, if by our preaching we don't disturb somebody, then we haven't been successful. In other words, we don't intentionally go out to, okay, I'm going to hit you on the head there. How does that feel? No, but sometimes getting the absolute truth in an unadulterated manner, it can be disturbing because it shakes your mindset. It pushes your comfort zone. Because Vidura was interacting with his relatives, he was being very careful. They were already devotees. So his etiquette was a little different than the etiquette that we observe when we're preaching. In our preaching, we have to disturb them. Otherwise, how then we are happy to see them suffering? There they are suffering out of ignorance, and we pat them on the head. Oh, very good. What kind of compassion is that? So I'm just making this point because in that particular aspect about speaking unpalatable truth, not speaking unpalatable truth in order not to distress others, it was a different dynamic. So the dynamic there with Vidura and the Pandavas they're already devotees. But when someone's not a devotee, they need to be disturbed. They need to be jarred out of their faulty conditioned mindset. So and then it was pointed out that the duty of enlightened souls is to deliver the fallen souls. And it said, well, that's the reason Vidura came. But this is a massive, the duty of the enlightened souls to deliver the fallen souls. Why did Prabhupada come to America? Was he a tourist? Did he come to see the Niagara Falls, or the Grand Canyon? No, he came to give transcendental knowledge and enlightenment. And in the same way, Vidura was attracting the attention of his family members. And they took pleasure in hearing him. They said and how were they hearing? It was described, they were hearing him patiently. So Prabhupada commented, this is the way of spiritual realization. The message should be heard attentively. And if it's spoken by a real life soul, then it will act on the dormant heart of the conditioned soul. And then by this continuous hearing, one will come to the perfective stage of self-realization. He also would comment to us that one must repeatedly hear the message of self-realization in order to learn. In other words, even in school, they'll have the kids recite 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 2, 1 and 1 is 2. You say it over and over until you get it. The same thing with our spiritual life. We have to repeatedly hear. How many times have we heard a wonderful class? And at the end of the class, we're thinking, oh, that was really a great class. You'll say to somebody, just heard a great class. And the person says, oh, what did the person say? And suddenly you can't even, I don't know, but it was really good. So this repetition is necessary in order for something to be learned. And then the interesting thing, which is something that we all can relate with, was Vidura's position in the world was not equal to the rest of his family. In fact, he was considered to be lowborn because why? His mother was a Sudra. So he wasn't even allowed to be part of the royal heritage. So then here he is, he's instructing the kings, he's instructing Kshatriyas. How is it that he could be acting on this Brahminical level? And we can say the same. Who among us has any kind of high birth? And yet we're going out there and approaching people, giving them this highest level of knowledge available. So how is that possible? And that, in the case of Vidura, and which could be also our case, is that he was accepted, even though he was Sudra by birth. In the Kali Yuga, yes, everyone is born Sudra. But because he renounced the world for spiritual enlightenment due to the authority of Rishi Maitreya, he became thoroughly educated in transcendental knowledge. So Srila Prabhupada has left us this treasure trove of transcendental knowledge through his books. I think there's now books translated in 85 different languages. So it's quite amazing. And if we study these books, we become educated in these books. What are these books? Or transcendental knowledge. Then such a person is competent to occupy the post of an acharya or a spiritual preceptor. And secondly, according to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, anyone who is conversant in the transcendental knowledge, the science of Godhead, is eligible to become a spiritual master. And of course, this is a topic kind of at the forefront right now in ISKCON. On one level, this is understood, but on another level, some people have a difficulty. Okay, I can understand this, but I can't accept it. Anyone who is conversant in the transcendental knowledge, the science of Godhead, is eligible to become a spiritual master. Never mind what country or what kind of body you were born in. So this is one of the glorious aspects of the teachings of Mahaprabhu. So actually, Sudra, Vidura, any devotee, is not actually a Sudra. And in the case of Vidura, he was playing that part, but he was not. He was not a Sudra. In fact, he was even more interesting that he was an incarnation of Yamaraj, one of the 12 Mahajans. So therefore, he was on the level with exalted personalities such as Brahma and Narada, Shiva, Kapila, Bhishma, and Prahlad, etc. But just as a personality of Godhead, he assumes his incarnation as a hog, but he's not a hog. He's not a Brahman. He's above all this. The Lord and his different authorized devotees, sometimes they play the role of lower creatures only to claim conditioned souls. But both the Lord and his pure devotees, they're always in a transcendental position. So the conclusion is that Vidura / devotees are never Sudras, as would be commonly understood, but are greater than the purest types of Brahmanas due to the unalloyed devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada also, in his delivering this message, you're reading these purports, and sometimes it's almost semi-shocking. You're just like, wow, he really said that. This is pretty tough. Like one such thing is insurmountable eternal time imperceptibly overcomes those who are too much attached to family affairs and are always engrossed in their thought. So how, our movement is largely based on the Grihastha ashram, and such a statement can sometimes be kind of bewildering because it seems to like disfavor the family. Those who are too much attached to family affairs are, how can they possibly advance? But the family affairs of devotees is a different thing. Family affairs in a mundane sense are totally disfavorable because their affairs are not attached to serving Krishna. Whereas in the devotee life, everything is dedicated, including one's family, to serving Krishna. So that is something that would that can be understood. And then trying to understand, this wonderful material body that we're in, that we're always trying to make all kinds of adjustments for comfort. And we know this material body is subject to birth and death, disease and old age. And we know it's causing all sufferings of living beings, and we understand the living being is eternal. We're never born, we don't die. But at the same time, it's pointed out, foolish persons forget this. And even we forget it. We know it on the one hand, but then we become involved and distracted and we forget about it. Well, this is called illusion. Prabhupada pointed out, becoming engrossed in temporary family affairs means unconnected to Krishna, not knowing that their measured duration of life is diminishing every second without any solution to the big problem. And of course, the big problem is that secondary mantra, birth, death, disease, and old age. That is illusion. And that illusion cannot work, however, on one who is awake in devotional service to the Lord. So many of us now are experiencing this old age. Prabhupada describes old age as the notice of arrival of death served by cruel time. And no one can refuse to accept we can't ignore it. We may not like it, but it's knocking on the door. And this summon is coming from the Supreme Lord, who is eternal time. And Prabhupada explains, or Lord Krishna explains in the Gita, that death is identical with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is the Lord himself. That death is identical with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This mrityu sarvaharashchaham, that death cannot be checked by anyone or from any source from within the material world. So better we acknowledge it and prepare for it. And there was one part in the purports. So it's a very charming description of old age. Your eyesight begins to fail. You become hard of hearing. Your memory is shortened and your intelligence is disturbed. Your teeth are loose. Your liver is defective. You're coughing up mucus and your digestion is just whacked out. Welcome to old age. What can we do about it? You know, people can run to this doctor, that doctor, try this diet, try that diet. But really, if we waste time in trying to just prolong the inevitable, we're going to miss the importance of the human form of life. So a sadhu like Vidura, and our business is to speak about the Prabhupada calls the naked truth of life. So these poor souls, illusion can come to their senses about the precarious life and material existence. I'm not sure of how many of you are familiar with the poetry of Srila Prabhupada, but there's one small book out with his poetry, and I highly recommend reading that book. There's various poems he wrote at various stages, but in one of the poems, he makes a comment, "Today I have been shown the naked truth." And without becoming aware of this naked truth of life, we'll just remain in a very precarious life of material existence. So the most kindest, compassionate, loving gift you can give to anyone is to help them pull out of this type of illusion. One of my godbrothers was dying, and he had kind of fallen away. He did fall away, not kind of, from the association of devotees. And he was in the hospital. His hair had gotten a little long, and his mother came to see him. And, you know, what a thing for a mother to see right in front of her eyes, her son is dying. She put his head on her lap and she brought out her hairbrush from her handbag and she starts combing his hair. And just at that time, his godbrother comes in and he saw that scene and he goes, "Are you going to die in your mother's arms? I won't allow this. I'm taking you to Vrindavan." I mean, he could barely walk. He was really on the way out. But this godbrother was so compassionate. He got him to Vrindavan, and with just in a few days, he was able to leave his body in Vrindavan hearing the holy name. Whereas just a few days previously, he was stupidly lying with his head in the lap of his mother who was, you know, combing his hair. So devotees, they know how to be compassionate, and they can insist on compassion in certain instances, such as that. For a devotee, death is not to be not even in our mind to be we can't avoid it anyway, but you know, people try that all the time. But it's a wonderful thing for a devotee because we're moving closer to Krishna, if not all the way. In my early stage of Krishna consciousness, 67, a letter came from India to Srila Prabhupada. And I was in the temple, which was underneath Prabhupada's apartment. He was on third floor, temple was on the ground. Mailman brings a letter, and Janaki was there with me. And we took the opportunity to take this letter up to Srila Prabhupada. And we knocked on his door. He came and she goes, "Swamiji, you got a letter from India." So he took the letter, and Janaki, she was a little impetuous, and she's still looking, "But Swamiji, aren't you going to read it?" So to oblige her, he opened the letter, and but he didn't, you know, show any emotion, he didn't say anything, and she was pressing, "But Swamiji, was it good news? Was it good news?" And finally she said, "Yes." He said, "Yes," and then he could understand. What was the good news? So he said, without any, you know, extra superfluous like emotion one way or the other, he says, "My sister has died." So both of us, our faces like kind of like showed our, I could say we were surprised to hear that was good news. And then Prabhupada could notice that. And he said, "It's all right. She's gone back home. She's gone back to Godhead. She was a devotee." And that instance was one of those moments where you get a glimpse into the incredible life ahead as a devotee in Krishna consciousness. It was quite a beautiful moment because Srila Prabhupada, he just without any great, effort, just gave us a glimpse into the powerful perfection of being a devotee. I'm just looking at the time and it's moving along. One thing is, so like a wrap up in the mood here is that to satisfy the Lord, anything is good, for it's in relationship with this absolute truth. And we also have the same opportunity. This is from Srila Prabhupada was writing this, to cheat family members and leave home to engage in the service of the Bhagavatam. Such cheating was necessary for a good cause, and there's no loss for any party in such transcendental fraud. So here we talk, we're like, talk about cunning politicians and cheating politicians, and here Prabhupada is condoning cheating. But what kind of cheating he's talking about is the cheating from the material point of view, not allowing something material to interfere with the opportunity to go back home, back to Godhead, and engage in the service of the Supreme Lord, or the Bhagavatam. And he says, such cheating is necessary for a great cause, and there's no loss for any party in such transcendental fraud. Such confidential devotees of the Lord are very dear to the Lord because they travel everywhere to preach the glories of the Lord in different capacities and try their utmost to convert non-devotees into devotees of the Lord and bring them to the platform of sanity. So Srila Prabhupada himself was such a cheat. His family was totally inimical towards his devotional efforts. He said in a letter to me that had his family been supportive of his efforts, there would have been no need to leave them, but they weren't. So it was actually, he left them in the middle of the night. He just left with a tiny little satchel with basic essential, change of clothes and maybe some suchi business, some little soap or toothbrush. And he had to do that. And that type of cheating is necessary, and it benefits the person, and in the broader sense, it is beneficial to the world. Just imagine if Prabhupada just stayed home with that family, who would have, they got him, they got him, but what would they have had? And because he took that opportunity to serve the Lord on a broader platform, the entire world has been benefited. And Prabhupada called that a transcendental fraud. There's no loss for any party. And this is the activities of a confidential devotee, that they want to broaden their field of activities for the benefit of the greater humanity. So, we all want to, I read something by Vaish earlier today, or heard it, sorry, but he was saying, we all want to become free of stress and anxiety. We want to live peaceful and happy lives. We try so hard to avoid anxieties, but somehow anxieties find their way into our lives. So it's very natural for us to yearn for and to work towards a perpetually peaceful existence. And on one hand, we're thinking, is it even possible? But actually, by the teachings of the Bhagavatam, by the teachings of the Gita, we understand this is obtainable, a perpetually peaceful existence. It requires a transformation in consciousness. So this is what Prabhupada brought about, gave to us, a revolution in consciousness. And, we keep in mind that our hearts become troubled when we allow trivial or disturbing sights and sounds to enter our ears and eyes and accumulate in our minds. It's not what's happening, it's what we allow to happen by allowing disturbing sights and sounds to enter our ears and eyes. And then it accumulates in our minds. How many times, when you put your hand in the bead bag to sit down to chant japa, and some stupid random thought from, recent past or far away past, pops into you and just like throws you off. So therefore, just as we're very careful, hopefully when you go to eat something, sometimes you have to buy some ingredient from the store. So they have on the packaging some, here's the ingredients. So we read those ingredients because we don't want to take something that would be unofferable. We're very careful. What do we put in our mouth? But how careful are we when it comes to looking at different sights, or hearing different sounds, or looking, we have to be more careful. And therefore, devotional service is the perfected way, because all of our senses will actually be wonderfully engaged in Krishna's service. And just as it was describing how the cow becomes pulled by the nose, we can also, our senses get pulled by so many activities. But if our senses are engaged in Krishna's service, which includes serving devotees, most importantly, actually, then we will be pulled always in the right direction. So, quick wrap up. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Mother. I was thinking you would end earlier than you did, but I think that is the power of Krishna and his name. Once we start talking about Krishna, it's really difficult to stop. So at this point, we're going to ask the devotees. Mother doesn't have enough time to be with us today. So if there is 1-2 questions she might take before she leaves. Mother, I don't want to be pessimistic, but I oftentimes have this problem in my own little head that seeing how Srila Prabhupada's direct disciples who had no clue about spirituality just followed him and did whatever he asked them to do. Even sometimes they may be thinking, the disciples may be thinking, what Swamiji is saying, I don't think it's going to work. But oftentimes they went ahead and then did it anyway. And looking at the lifestyle of Yudhishthira Maharaj, himself and his brothers, they did not want to engage in the Kurukshetra war. But because Krishna wanted them to fight, they fought anyway. And we see, even after the war, even after Yudhishthira had been put on the stool as the emperor, he still was having this guilt that, oh, I caused this mess, I did this, I did that. And when Dhritarashtra and the wife left, he was still blaming himself. So my question is, sometimes as aspiring devotees, our gurus may ask us to do something which, according to our own mundane estimation, does not really serve us well, but we still may try to do that. And when we do that and we still have some guilt, do we still gain some punya just by following the orders of the spiritual master? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Actually, it's a very good question. It's also very complex. Sometimes it's also a matter of timing. So the time may not be right at that moment to, carry out the order. And that was exemplified by Srila Prabhupada himself, who was told in 1922 to go out and preach to the West. And yet we know he didn't leave India until 65. He said, but I never forgot that order. I was always thinking how to do it. So it can be, sometimes there's a suspension of the activity of the order, but not to neglect it. So that's one thing. Another thing, not that we question we should question the order in terms of, well, how can this be fulfilled? Make sure we understand the order properly too, because it may be not properly understood. And it just may not be the time. depending on what the order is, it could be that actually it's not applicable. It may be even something that could be harmful to the disciple. I have seen this. So it's a very delicate thing. But the first thing comes, it may be timing, get clarification, and if it seems to you that there may be some heavily negative impact, speak with other senior devotees, not to try to stack the decks in your favor, but to try to see, am I understanding this correctly or not? I had a situation, honestly speaking, that it was on actually three occasions. So it was very difficult that this one spiritual master, it's a dear godbrother of mine. I have nothing unkind to say or harsh to say about him. But he gave an instruction that was causing great distress to the disciple, to the point where the person was going further away from Krishna consciousness. So I consulted with Krishna Nandini. She's a very wise personality, I miss her greatly. And she was like so happy because she had also observed this. So it was a perplexity in our minds. And for us, it was like, he's got to get away. But then how do you tell somebody, just put this aside, it's an amount, it also almost amounted to saying, disobey the orders of your guru by saying, neglect it, don't do it. It was quite, an awkward situation, but the person was going away. So our focus was keep him in Krishna consciousness, So sometimes there are these awkward situations, and it's really important to speak with senior devotees to get their reflections and to get their input, So, of course, I think we have a guru on the call, so maybe we can ask that guru on the call, unless he dropped out when he heard me say that. No,
Well, thank you so much, Mother, because your answer to my question helps me a lot. As I was hearing you speak, and I was also trying to digest what you were saying, timing is always very important thing. Thank you so much. So we don't kill ourselves that, I disobeyed the orders of the spiritual master. If there is sincerity there, and we also have it in our mind and thought that this is something Gurudev has asked me to do, and I should be able to do it. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So I'll take leave, all of you now. And
yes, please.
I hope I didn't offend anybody by my
speaking
a little.
Not at all.
But we're all still. I'm in great marvel and awe at the depth of many of my godbrothers and sisters, as well as the grand disciples of Srila Prabhupada. It's like many of you, you're not new kids on the block. You've practiced Krishna consciousness seriously for decades, and Krishna consciousness does work. Now, some people, it says, just a moment's association with a pure devotee and you're set, you're liberated. So you may think, well, what happened to me? The Prabhupada gives the answer. It's like, wet wood and dry wood both contain the element of fire, but it's not manifested. The dry wood will immediately flame. The wet wood, it will take some time. So many of us are still in the wet wood stage. So if we want to move ourselves along, it's imperative that we become more determined, more enthusiastic, and at the same time, hold on to some patience.
Thank you so much, Mother, for such an encouragement. So before you leave, please just spare us a second. We ask all the devotees to unmute themselves, and then we chant big Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to express our appreciation for Mother's presence here. So, Jai. Hare
Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna
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 Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare,
Rama Hare
Hare
Rama
Rama,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Rama
Rama
Rama,
Hare Hare.
Hare
Panchakalpatarubhyascha
Sarvascha
kripa
Kripasinyo Vacha Patitanam Hare Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Jai.
Namo Namaha. I
Hare
hope I see Salika is in a car. I hope he's not driving and watching
Yes,
the video.
Krishna.
Otherwise, you can also sing the prayers for him. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
thank you, Mother, for your concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Bol.
Hare
Thank you.
So, devotees, we see you all again tomorrow. Hare Krishna.